What's going on, guys? So today I'm going to show you how to make a backend API in JavaScript, and we're going to use the Node.js runtime to be able to do this. So this is the second part to my video about HTTP, and in this video we're going to put into practice all the theory that we talked about. If you didn't watch that video, I suggest you go watch it, but if you didn't watch it, it's still possible for you to follow along with this video, if you're pretty sharp. So there's some prerequisites to this. Actually, you need to know JavaScript to be able to do this. I'm not going to teach JavaScript in this video. That would be a super long video, and we're not going to do that right now. I'm just showing you how to make APIs with JavaScript. And you obviously should know at least a little bit about HTTP, but if you don't, it's all right. I'll kind of guide you there too. So first thing you need is Node.js installed. So go ahead, install Node.js. You need that for sure. I use VS Code, so you need an IDE, you need somewhere to code. I would use VS Code. You can use whatever you want though. And we're gonna use Postman. So this is like a program that helps you test your APIs, and it's super useful. And then for our backend framework, for our server API framework, we're gonna use Express, and it's actually one of the most popular, if not the most popular, backend framework in JavaScript. And if we see here in the last week, it received 22 million downloads. That's quite a lot of downloads. So we're going to be using that. It's the most popular, the most unopinionated, simple, and it's just the quickest way to get started in JavaScript, making APIs. I have this empty directory here. I got Postman open over here, but we're just going to get started. So first thing you want to do is you want to open your terminal. I just did that with control and backtick. So what you want to do is run npm init. And this is just going to initialize a project, a Node.js project for you. Well, not really a Node.js project, but a Node.js project that uses the Node package manager, which we're going to be using. So then we're going to give it a -y. This is just to skip all of the questions they ask us. So do that. Then we go in here and we see it filled out this for us, but it left some stuff blank because we wanted to skip all the configuration. So here we're going to create an index.js file, and that's going to be the main entry point of our application. Okay, so I want to create a script called start, and all it's going to do is run all it's going to do is run node on our index.js file. So now the first thing we want to do is actually install the backend framework that we're going to use. So all you got to do is npm install express, just like that, and it's going to go ahead and install for you. Okay, now that that's done, we can actually get started. So I'm just going to create a file here called index.js, and this is going to be the entry point of our application. So just to get started, we're going to actually import express, which is our framework that we're using. So const express is equal to require express. Pretty simple. And then we want to initialize an application. So do const app, and then you just initialize express. And if you're wondering, like, how am I getting this magical knowledge that I have to run this as a function, don't worry about it. It's all on their website. So if you have any doubts, check out their website. Okay. First thing we want to do is actually make our server start listening to requests. So if you watch my last video, or you might know, we need to receive requests to be able to respond to them. So our server needs to actually start receiving them. So here we're going to do app.listen. Now, the first argument it takes here is a port number. So a port number that we're going to be listening to for request. So that port, let's say it will be 5000. So whenever a request is sent to the IP address of this computer and then the port 5000, it's gonna our server is gonna receive that request. And then it does here a little callback. You can do a callback here. It's optional though. And basically, a lot of people, what we just do is just console log server started on port 5000. Just so it can be in the console stated that the server actually started up well. Everything went perfectly. So let's just do that. Okay, so now let's actually run our server. So If you created the script as I did, all you got to do is go in here and do npm start, and it runs your server. And so if you take a careful look down here, you see it says server start on port 5000. So everything should be going great. Now let's say we want to change the port to, I don't know, 4000, right? And we want to print 4000, and I want to save that. Oh, but what a hassle. Now I gotta close my application, then I gotta run it again, npm start, and that's just super annoying. So I have a suggestion for you. I have this pro tip right here. That's, you just go in here in your scripts and you make a script called dev. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with an API? Trust me, this is gonna save you so much time in the long run. Like, if you don't do this, it's gonna bite you in the butt, I promise you. It's gonna just waste your time. You might forget, you might even get confused because you forgot to turn off your server. Trust me, if you want to succeed, you should probably be doing this. So, okay, what you want to do is you want to install this program which runs your Node applications, but it detects any changes in the file. And when a change happens, it restarts it automatically for you. And that's super useful. So what you want to do is do npm install, and then you want to do -D. So this basically means that we're installing a dependency to our application, a library, but it's only necessary when we're in development. When we're in production, when our application or API is shipped, we're not going to be using this. That's what this means. So it's going to be called nodemon, right? Kind of like node monitor. So it's going to monitor our Node application and restart it when necessary. And then go in here, create the script that I was talking about called dev, and it just runs nodemon index.js. And so from here on out, we're not going to have to restart application at all. Okay, so here you just do npm dev. So whenever, oops, I think I forgot to save this file. Okay, npm dev. I guess you have to do run dev. You have to do run dev. I guess it doesn't work all the time when you just do the shorthand, but whenever you want to run a script, you do npm run and the name of the script. So now we see server started on port 4000. Let's go here, change this to 5000, save, boom, it restarted. So now we don't have to worry about that at all. So I'm just going to minimize this. Okay. And so now we're ready to start receiving requests. At the moment, our application is receiving requests, but it's not handling them in any way. So it's just receiving them, but it's not really doing anything. Nothing's going on. So let's actually start handling requests. So if you watched my last video, or you might be familiar, there's something called a GET request. It's the most basic type of request that you can do. So we're gonna start handling GET requests to our application. So app.get, that's all you need, app.get, and then you need to pass in some arguments. The first argument is the path that you want this request to be handled from. So when a request is sent to the path in this string, we want to run this function. And this function takes in the request object and the response object. So here we pass in the string of the path, and when you put a slash, it means just nothing. So basically when we go to localhost 5000 or our IP address port 5000 nothing, it would match the slash, which indicates the root of the application, right? If you put here slash user, it would be your website.com/user. But if you put nothing here, it would just be your website.com, and that's it. So this is kind of like the top level of your application here. So what you have access to here is the request request object, as well as the response object. So you can do request dot. You got all these juicy things here. You got access to the headers, to the host name, the IP address, any parameters. So you can do params, anything they sent in the URL bar. Also, you got access to the body in JSON. So you got access to a lot here. But for now, all we're gonna do is do response.send. And here we can send a string. And when we're sending a string, it's gonna be parsed as HTML in the browser. So just so you know. And here we can just send over an H1 that says hello world, and then we want to close that h1 tag. Okay, so now let's go and test our application. So let's go over here, and I'm actually going to open a browser because we're testing with HTML, but for the rest of the video, I'm not going to be using a browser. This is just for this one use case here. So I'm going to go over here to http://localhost. So whenever you're in development and you want to connect to the IP address of your computer, you just put localhost and your browser or your computer will handle that for you. You don't gotta worry about that. So we're running on port 5000, so you put :5000 and just a slash, but you don't have to put the slash, okay? So let's see what happens. Something went wrong here. Oh, it's I don't know why it says HTTPS here, but HTTP. Okay, so yeah, my browser had auto-completed to HTTPS, but you want to make sure you match HTTP because that's what we're using in this video. So here you see hello world in h1 tag, and you can obviously, we can change this to a p tag, right? And we refresh, it's a p tag. It's just a little paragraph text. So as you see, our server's working, and we just got the little hello world screen. And this is actually the first API or first server that I had ever created. I just made a server that responded with some HTML. So if you got this far and it's your first time, congratulations. This is where it all begins. So now we don't want to just respond with this. You know, modern APIs, they respond with JSON. They receive data, they respond with other data, they do a bunch of crazy things. So that's what we want to do, right? Not too crazy, but we want to get a little bit familiar with that type of development cycle, right? So I'm gonna just get a little bit deeper into this topic. So if you remember, you can actually receive parameters through the URL request. So when a client sends you a request, they can actually send in the URL itself a parameter, and we're gonna want to handle that. So let's say that we're expecting to receive a parameter called user. So here we will do const user equals request.params.user, just like that. And so we want to respond with, let's say, user, and we just want to add an exclamation point to the end of the string. So we can do response.send, and we can do user plus exclamation point, right? So let's go over here to Postman, and I'm gonna go in here, and when you have Postman, you can just open up a tab right here, and you have to enter the URL. So here's localhost 5000, and then I'm gonna do a slash, right? And then, well, you don't need to do the slash, then you do a question mark, right? And here's when you would enter the parameter. So your parameter, our parameter in this case is user, and it's gonna be equal to, I'm gonna put Lester, so Lester is fine. And let's send this over and let's see what response we get. Okay, so we got undefined, something went wrong on our server. And let's try to debug real quick. So I'm just gonna console log user, and I'm gonna see what went wrong. So here says undefined. That would be because it's not in params, it's actually in query. So this is not a parameter, it's actually a query. So when you do this, now it works. And here we console logged Lester. So yeah. And it's actually okay if you get these type of things mixed up, because it's very easy to make a simple mistake as this. But don't worry, because if you ever run into a little mistake or bug like this, you can just search it up and you'll find a solution in probably like 10 seconds. Google or DuckDuckGo, whatever you use, that's your best friend in this case. So you access the query parameters by doing .query, okay? My bad on that one. Okay, so now we have an API, a pretty dumb one, but it's still an API. So we can put here Bob, and we get Bob exclamation point, or Alice, right? And then we do that. Let's go a little bit deeper into this, right? Let's say we want to actually create users in our application, and we're not gonna implement a database in this video. That's you can watch my series that I've created. I've created full stack applications on my channel, implementing databases with backends, and you can go ahead and watch that if you want to get deeper, but this is not in the scope of this video. So let's create a little example though, kind of like simulating that situation. So here I want to create a endpoint on my application. So here's our first endpoint that we created. I want to create another one, and I want to let it be to receive post requests. And if you remember, post request is when the client wants to create data on the backend. So I want users to go to send a post request to /users with the username and password in the body of the request. And I want to be able to add that to my database and then respond with something like, yeah, everything went fine, right? So here I'm going to create a object of an array. I'll create an array of users, right? And it will be in the format of something like this, something like that, right? So I'm just going to initialize it as an empty array, just like that. And then here I'm going to do app.post /user. So when I get request at /user, I want to run this function, and the first thing I want is access to the body. So I do const user is equal to request.body.user. But since we're fancy, we know JavaScript, we know ES6, we can just destructure that, right? Keep it more elegant, right? So now I want to do user.push, and then we push an object that has username equal to user.username. And yeah, you would push the password, but you would have to hash it and salt it. So we're not doing that in this video. So just pushing the username, right? But you would hash the password, but let's just actually just put it in plain text. You would never do this. Warning, do not do this ever in production. Do not just stick their password in your database, ever. Never do that, okay? Okay, so now that we have them, we just want to respond with JSON that says logged in is true, status is everything went well. And we don't actually need a status because our backend automatically responds with status codes, but I'm just doing this just for a little test, right? Okay, so now let me go over here to Postman and let me make a post request to /user. And actually, we should actually name this create_user, not /user. So here we can do create_user, and then change this to a post request. And then go over here in our body and want to send some raw JSON. So this would be a object, and it would contain the username. So ideally this would be coming from a front end, but since we're testing it, it's just coming straight up from Postman. So here the username will be Bob and the password will be mom, right? And this has to be strings because it's in pure JSON. So not JavaScript object, but it's actually JSON. So now we're gonna send over a post request and we're gonna create this user. And actually I want to do something. Every time a user is created, I actually want to console log my users array just so we can see it over here in our backend. Oof, if I can type. And this needs to be plural because there's more than one user. And over here, okay. So now I can send this over and something went wrong, okay. Let me go over here and see. It seems like we cannot destructure request.body. Well, let's actually try console logging request.body and let's see what happens. Undefined. So aren't we sending something in the body? Why is it undefined? Well, this framework Express that we're using, it's very minimalist. It only does the basic things for you. So if you want to actually accept JSON in your application, you need to do that. You need to set that up. So here, and I'm actually going to introduce you into a very important concept when it comes to APIs and backend. So it's something called middleware. So middleware is any program or any function, anything basically that runs in between the beginning and the end of the request and response cycle. Anything that handles a request and before the response is sent, that would be considered a middleware. Basically, our entire application is just a bunch of middleware joined up together. So we're gonna set up a new middleware, and to do that, you do app.use. So this basically says I want my application to use any middleware that I specify in this use function. This use function takes in a function, and the function should have the signature of request, response, and next. And so whenever you're in here, what you do is whatever you would do whatever you need to do with these object request and response objects, and then you would call next, which tells the application, okay, you're good, go on to the next middleware in the line, right? If you send a response and you call next, you're gonna get a bug, so never do that, because you should only have one response, right? So most of the time you won't even be using this, right? Next basically means go on to the next middleware. So if you don't call next here, none of your rest of your application will run, because this always runs first. So just keep that in mind. If you ever want to create a middleware, you have to be aware of that. But in our case, we're not going to be creating a middleware. We're actually going to be using a pre-existing middleware. So here we want to use a middleware that Express has for us called express.json. And it's a function that returns a middleware. And so this is all you need to do to start accepting JSON in your application. So now when we save this file, it restarts our application. Now we go in here and we can actually create a user. Something still went wrong. I'm actually gonna console log request.body and see what went wrong. I actually structured this application incorrectly. So when I first created this middleware thing, I was expecting a user object in the body. So I was expecting something like this, and then with this inside of it. So that's not a problem. We can actually do that. But I actually forgot that that's what I was planning to do. So yeah, that's not a problem though. So we can just do that. So it's basically an error on the client side, if you want to think about it like that. The client incorrectly sent the format. It needs to be a user object with the username and password inside. So now when we send this, it's going to work. So logged in is true, everything went well. Let's check our backend. So here we printed out the array and it contains our first user. So now let's create a new user. So here we call Charlie, right? And the password is dad123 football, right? Pretty dumb password, but let's just say that's Charlie's password. Okay, so let's check our backend. Here we have our users being printed out. And I think you're kind of getting a hang of this whole thing. Let's say that we want to create a endpoint where someone can get all the users of our application. So we're going to do that here. So we're going to do app.get/users. We get request response, and then we want to send response.json with all of our users. So we're just going to send an array of users straight over to the backend, just like that. And if you're not using the request object, you can actually signify that by using a underscore instead of actually calling it a variable. So now let's go over to our backend and let's send a get request to users with no body. So we get rid of that body, and then we do send. And we got an empty array. And that would be because we restarted our application, which kind of sucks. So that means I actually need to send a post request again. Bear with me here. So user, like that. Username would be Bob, and then password would be 123, right? So we want to create that user, and Bob2, and then 1234, and then Alice, and then hi. So now I have 3 users in our database, and I'm going to create a new tab here, and it's going to be a get request, and we want it to be sent over to localhost 5000/users. So we're just going to retrieve all the users of our application, and here down here we get an array in this JSON. We get an array and it has all of our users. So I think you might just be getting a hang of this by now, and you might see how this could be powerful. So imagine if this was an actual database and you would start implementing friends list, you would start doing things like the posts, or maybe you can do a blog, or maybe you can do anything, basically anything your creativity can imagine. You can basically make an API about. So now I want to show you how to implement some more endpoints. So I showed you get and post, but let's actually implement one that's put. So put would be, I want to replace my account. So I want to create a new account, but it's going to replace the old one. So here you do app.put, right? And then you could do anything here. So update old, and you could handle that however you want, right? And you could also do app.delete, right? And then it would be /delete, and then you can handle that. So I'm not going to implement put. I just wanted to show you the function for that, but I will be implementing delete here just to make another endpoint here. And so it's going to be taking a username and a password. So we want to do here username and password, and we're going to do a little bit different from up here. So let's say you don't really need a user and then a user object, you just want an object with username and password. And then we want to destructure that, and then we want to do, we do const existing user is equal to users.find, and then here we get a user, we'll name it user.username is equal to username, and u.password is equal to password. So we want to, oops, messed up there. We want to console log the existing user, and then we do if existing user, or sorry, if there's not an existing user, we do response dot JSON, and then here we can do status, or we can name this error status, and then it would be credentials did not match. And so let's say we want to send an error code with this too, so we can do response.status code, and let's say 401, which stands for forbidden, and then the JSON as well. And so if there is an existing user, we would actually do users.splice to get rid of one, and then we would do users.index of, and it will just be index of existing user, and delete count would be 1. And then we'll do response.json with our new users object. Okay, so let's go over here and start creating some users. So I'm going to create Alice2, and we just add 2 to the end, 3, right? And now let's delete the first Alice that we created. So we go here to localhost 5000 /delete. We send a body, it's in raw JSON, and it's just going to contain the username Alice, and the, oops, it has to be string, and the password of, and what was the password here? Let's actually send a get request to get of our users. Password was hi. Okay, and we send that over, and we got our new users array, which contains all the previous users except Alice and hi with the password of hi. So when we send a new request to get all of our users, she's not there anymore. And that's basically all you need to know to start bootstrapping APIs. So now I'm going to show you one more thing, and this is so you can actually keep your code organized and follow best practices. So you never want to clutter your index.js like this. Like your main entry file, you do not want it to be cluttered. You want to keep it as clean as possible. So here I'll show you something you can follow. So first, you will want to create a source folder, and you want to stick your files in there just to keep them separate from the node modules and package.json and any other, maybe you might have other configuration files in the future. Then here you would want to separate all of this. So here you would want to create a folder maybe called routers, and you can create one router called index router. And this is not a definite semantic, so you can structure it however you want as long as you keep it organized. But this is how I might do it with a small API like this. So here in this index router, you would want to import express, right? But then express has this thing called a router. So you can do router and get that from express, and then do module.exports equals router. And so this router is basically just this same thing right here, right? And I'll show you something really cool. So now you can grab all of this nice stuff here, all of this cool stuff here, grab it, stick it in your index router, and replace everything here with router. So we want to initialize router, so we do const router equals new router, and then here you would do router dot in front of everything. So router, and replace app with router basically. Just like that, okay? And so now in your index.js, let me save all my files. In your index.js, you would have to actually import your router. So const index router is equal to require routers index router, and then you would do app.use index router, just like that. And now our application, if everything went well, something did not go well. Let me see. I think we need to restart this because we changed the folder structure here. And the script, we need to update the script here. So it needs to be in our new source folder, like that. And we can do npm run dev, right? So let's go over here and try this all over again. So here I'm going to create a user. Something went wrong. Okay, so I found the bug, and it's because I was exporting this, so this router from Express instead of our router, right? So I was exporting the wrong thing. So you just want to make sure you export the correct variable. So this right here is what you want to export. And there's actually two ways to do this. So instead of doing this, you could just come in here and do express dot, and then you just call router. But I just decided to do the other way. It's the same thing though, it's no difference. So now our main index file is clean, and I already tried one here, but let me just create a new account and see everything went well, and we get our users from here, and everything's going great. Now there's also something you can do. So if you remember, we just set up this middleware called of our index router, and you could actually make it behind a /API. So this is what a lot of APIs do. So now you don't just access it at your website /users, you do /API/users, right? And that's something that's pretty cool. So you can actually have like this, and then you can do like admin and then admin router, and then you can implement basically anything you want. You have a lot of freedom here. And so I'm just gonna leave you off with one more really cool thing. So let's get rid of this to clean this up. And I want to show you this. So you can do router.route, and then here you can do .get, and then in the route you would specify users, right? Or you just put user, right? And then you can do .get, and then your request response, right? And so let's get this from over here. And you can basically join all of these routes under the same route as long as everyone is a different type of request. So if you want the same route to handle get and posts, you can do that. So here, I'm gonna do that. So when there's a .post, get request response, and just copy this over here. Just like that. Okay, and then you can keep it up. You can keep doing this chain. So dot delete request response, right? And then you would go copy this up here. So there's use cases for this, you know. So here now we have one route as /user, and you can do a get and you get all the users. You can do a post, create a user, or you can delete one, all in the same route. So that's a pretty cool way to do that. So now you would just do .user, and if it's a get, you get all the users, and if it's a post, you would create users. So we would have to go here and do this, so like that. And this is an object, username Alice, and then password, if I can spell password right, is 123, right? So now you can do a post and then a get. So I don't have to type everything again. I'm just gonna do it here and then get rid of the body, right? So you can do a get and you get all your users. You can do another post, and it's all in the same route, if you can tell. And then you can just change this to a delete, get rid of this thing, so we do it in the right format. And then we do to get all of our users. So here, down here, we have 2. Now we only have 1. So yeah, that's pretty much all the basics of doing an API in a backend with Node.js. And with this knowledge, you can basically get started making APIs and start making backend or full stack applications. By the way, if you notice, I made a couple mistakes in this video, but I've decided to just keep that in because I want to prove a point that you don't need to memorize everything. Google or DuckDuckGo, whatever you use, is literally a click away. You go here and you type, right? There's no person on this earth that has everything memorized about this stuff, guys. So don't feel bad if you have to search stuff up. Even the professional senior developers, they search things up. But guess what the difference is between a senior dev and a junior dev? A senior dev has a skill of looking things up, and they have the skill of going through documentation and reading things, and only reading things quickly, saving time and developing faster, right? So it's not about memorizing stuff, it's about using the correct tools. And once you use something a lot, you might just remember it, right? But you're not expected to memorize everything. So if you forget anything here, obviously you can watch this video again, or you can just search it up. Let's say you have a problem like I did early in the video, and you didn't know how to access the query parameters of a request. All you can do is do express query parameters, right? And click anything here. Like, guys, don't be ashamed. Stack Overflow is great, guys. Okay, go here and you see request.query dot the name of the parameters. So there's very easy to just get solutions, but you just can't be ashamed. You can't have pride. You need to realize that you're not supposed to remember everything. You're supposed to use the right tools and be productive, guys. So it's all about the end product. It's not about being the best or remembering everything. It's about implementing solutions, knowing your stuff, knowing your fundamentals, knowing the theory, and then putting it into code. And if you don't know how, guess what? Search it up. You know what you're looking for. You're gonna find it a lot easier than if you didn't know anything at all. So I just wanted to leave a video on that, and I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoy this video and that you have a great day. I'll see you later.